nervous because I'm here now.
Hey guys, welcome into another episode of 410 Sports Talk. I'm James Haskell, along with my co-host Glenn Martin on this Christmas Eve edition of 410 Sports Talk. We're going to get into our preview of the Ravens-Giants game. Really excited to talk about this, nearing the end of the season. Obviously, every game matters. We need to win out, and we'll talk about that more. But before we get into this game, if you're new to the channel, you'll learn really quickly that we are all about the Ravens. We also mix in some NFL headlines. So if you're interested in staying up to date with your Baltimore Ravens, go ahead and take a second, hit subscribe, turn on those notifications so you can stay up to date with your Baltimore Ravens. In addition to that, Glenn, I'm going to hand the baton over to you here because I think that and I'll take full responsibility for this, missed someone on our last week's shout out for getting our weekly challenge right, which was which receiver was going to have the most receptions. So I'll pass that one over to you.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Last week was a little bit unknown who would get the lion's share of the targets and catches with all those receivers missing the full week of practice. And we missed too. We missed Laura Kimmel, who correctly predicted that the sticky hands of Marquise Brown would be the recipient of the most receptions last week. She was correct. We missed her. So sorry, Laura. But we got you this time, and hopefully you'll participate in the next one. And maybe start to catch up with Daniel, because right now Daniel has a sizable lead on everyone else with 3 correct predictions out of 3. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Let's get into some context, Jim. Let's talk a little bit of health. What do you got?
Yeah, so like you said, I got some health for you, and as far as the Ravens goes, where we'll start, we had 9 guys that didn't practice as of yesterday. I'm starting to get a little concerned, but I'll just run through the names here, and we can dig into it. Dez Bryant with a thigh issue didn't practice. Calais Campbell, who we know of, I'm assuming for the rest of the way is not going to be practicing throughout the in the middle of the week. With the calf issue, he said he's not 100%, still working his way back. Anthony Levine has the abdomen, which is once again something that's been plaguing him throughout the season. Pernell McPhee has a knee. Marcus Peters, of course, missed last week, still not practicing with the calf. Tyree Phillips, who got the scepter, if I'm not mistaken, this week in angry runs, but paid the price for it. And sustained a concussion. So Tyree also did not practice. Matt Skura with a back issue did not practice. Jimmy Smith with ribs and a shoulder.
Stop, Jimmy.
And
it's too many. It's too many.
I know. I feel like an auctioneer here. Probably an ailing groin as well, but he's got ribs and shoulder. There's probably only a limit to how many things you can put on there.
Yeah.
But Jimmy Smith is not practicing either. Christian Welch also didn't practice with a foot. And then lastly, the 10th guy, Patrick Card, was limited. We'll assume that he goes, but he's limited in practice. So before I get over to the Giants, though, Glenn, of those guys, who are you most concerned about?
Well, I mean, I think that they're starting to, unfortunately, get a little bit used to playing without Calais. So to me, I'm going to point to, either one of those guys in the secondary, Peters or Jimmy. It's a little bit scary. I hope at least one of them come back before the playoff run and can get back to somewhere near 100%, because if these injuries continue to linger on, I think they can get by the Giants, even if these 2 are forced to miss, but they're going to need at least one, but probably both if they're going to make any type of a playoff run.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it's crazy to say this because I'm all about Marcus Peters and the big play ability that he has. But I feel like for some reason we really have been missing Jimmy's physicality, his open field tackling, his ability to cover the wide receiver. And I think you mentioned this at the very beginning of the season. When Jimmy's out, everyone else shifts. I think that's the big issue. But when Jimmy's in, everyone like Marlon gets to go back to their true role.
Well, especially now that Tavon's out.
Right.
Because Tavon, Tavon forces Humphrey a lot of times to go into the slot and stuff like that. If Tavon was still in there, even if Jimmy's out, then I think it's a different story. But now that you have the combination of both of those, it definitely impacts the team, no doubt about it. And it's kind of funny because you talked about the physicality we're missing from Jimmy, and that's kind of what led him to this injury, because he came in using that physicality, taking on that lead blocker, I believe it was the tight end or maybe even a tackle, and he dove at the big fella, and that's how he hurt his ribs and his shoulder. So we miss it, but at certain points, I wish we need you on the field. Availability is what we need from Jimmy.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you there. Now, the other side of the coin, we have the New York Football Giants, who are a lot healthier than us right now. But Daniel Jones will be the headline. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? Apparently, some New York media, including former Ravens Chris Canty, who was also a Giant, has been critical of the Giants dealing with his injury. He has openly said that because they rushed him back before, he sustained a worse injury than he originally had. So he was airing his frustrations on how they've been treating his hamstring, and now they've added ankle to the issue. So now it's not just a hamstring, it's migrated to hamstring and ankle. He's limited in practice. They didn't have anyone that missed practice, but that's the headline. He's been limited. We're not sure which way they'll go. We'll assume that he's playing because he's limited in practice and it's Wednesday. But Evan Ingram is another one. They're Pro Bowl. Don't ask me how. Pro Bowl tight end. Evan Ingram was also limited. Darnay Holmes, of course, a corner for them, limited. Matt Pert has an ankle, also limited. And then Golden Tate is another, headline-worthy name, has a calf issue, also limited. But the big news is that they didn't have anyone that missed. So they're healthy going into this game, especially considering how late we are in the season.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people were unsure if Daniel Jones would be able to go, which would be a big advantage for the Ravens, even though Colt McCoy, he's a veteran. He was able to go into Seattle and win earlier this season. When you watch him throw the ball, it's a big difference from him and Daniel Jones, and not to mention the athleticism that Jones brings, which, of course, will be hampered with the hamstring and ankle injury. But, man, I would not want to hear my franchise quarterback has mistrust or anything like that with the training staff. That is not a good sign if you're a Giants fan. So hopefully for their sake, they can get that back on track because that's a little scary. But I want to get into some of the stats, okay, because they're in the NFC. We're AFC team over here in Baltimore, so we don't see a ton of the Giants, especially because they're not on TV very often. But so I want to get into some of the stats that they have coming to this game. I'll talk about Daniel Jones because it appears to be he's going to be the starter. On the season, he has a 62% completion percentage for 2,462 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. That's right. More interceptions than touchdowns. Never where you want to be as a quarterback. And as far as rushing, Wayne Gallman has taken over the starting role, and he has so far on the season 130 carries for 590 yards and 6 touchdowns, averaging 4.5 per carry. Also pitching in 19 catches for just 88 yards. And then as far as through the air, their leading receiver is the guy you mentioned, the Pro Bowler, Evan Ingram, even though we're still scratching our head. And I'll tell you, I'll explain why in just right now. He has 54 catches for 572 yards on the season, which isn't going to blow anyone away, and just 1 touchdown. Jimmy, I mean, how does a guy 54 catches, 572 yards, and just 1 score make the Pro Bowl?
Yeah, I don't understand that. And then I think I mentioned this to you. Tunyon from Green Bay has 10 touchdowns.
What?
10.
What?
Didn't make the Pro Bowl. And then on top of that, Ingram has to lead the league in drops in crucial moments. Him or Hollywood Brown. But, I mean, it's bad. There's a multitude of games this year where he's wide open and he gator arms it. He doesn't come up with it in the big moment. So I don't get that one at all, man. You've got me for sure. You've got me stumped.
And as you can hear, Jimmy is speaking from someone who has him on his fantasy team.
You're right.
But let's get into their receiving card because they do got some talent there, and there's no doubt about it. Sterling Shepard has 49 catches on the season for 467 yards and a touchdown. Slayton, their big play threat, 46 catches, 703 yards, 3 touchdowns, averaging 15 a catch. Definitely got to watch out for him. And then you mentioned the veteran Golden Tate, who's definitely not what he used to be at 32 years old, but still has 35 catches, 388 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And more importantly, he makes those tough catches. He doesn't get a ton of separation now, but man, he plays bigger than his size. He can go up and get the ball. So be on the lookout because, as we mentioned, there's some corners missing, looking like they're going to miss this game, and they could look to take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one thing I want to do really quickly is I want to take a step back. We just went over health, so we got some breaking news about today that I want to update you guys on because, Glenn, I think this is going to make you really happy.
Okay.
So I think it's worth mentioning. So first of all, the Ravens outside practicing in the rain. There were guys that weren't practicing. Mark Ingram, Marquise Brown, Brandon Williams, Jimmy Smith, Marcus Peters. Peters was on the sideline working with training staff. Ingram and Williams, not health related, is a vet day off. So the guys that we got back in practice today, Anthony Levine, Calais Campbell, Christian Welch, Dez Bryant, Tyree Phillips, Matt Skura, and Pernell McPhee were all practicing.
Oh, wow. That's huge.
So huge news. breaking news right here. You heard it first.
Wow.
Through our source. So really second, but you heard it right here on 410 Sports Talk. And I think that's really important. The two names there that I think are worth mentioning are Tyree Phillips, but also Mascara, because Mascara has been playing that role of the extra lineman when we go big. And I've liked him in there. And we need depth on the line. We can't go out there with 5 guys because things change rapidly on the offensive line when a big guy goes down. So I just want to take a second and mention that. But I also want to introduce our challenge of the week. I think it is a great one.
Okay. What do you got?
So, Glenn, this was your idea.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. So I just want to set the table here. So as far as the Ravens and the playoffs go, we need some help. It's no longer all in our hands. Of course, we have to win out. Mm-hmm. And we have the Giants, and then we have the Bengals, both winnable games. Yep. But if we do, we need help from either the Titans the Titans, the Browns, the Colts, or the Dolphins. Now, Glenn and I have predicted what will happen in our playoff picture episode. Mm-hmm. So go check it out. But what we want you guys to do, our challenge this week, is tell us which team is going to give us the help of those 4 to get in the playoffs. Titans, Browns, Colts, Miami. Who's going to slip up and open the door to the most dangerous team in the AFC right now, the Baltimore Ravens? Let us know, and we will give you a shout out on the show in our next episode when we recap the Ravens' victory over the Giants.
Yes, absolutely. I think this is exciting because even though they need help, I'm still confident that they're going to get in. But I want to see who, because there's a lot of different ways they can do it. I mean, 4 different teams that could find themselves out and the Ravens getting in. So it's gonna be interesting to see. But I'm excited. So I'm going to get into some questions and concerns, and we're going to start on the offensive side of the ball. Now, with the Ravens taking on a team like the Giants, they're certainly expected to beat this team. They're favored. It's a team that, even though the Giants still have something to play for, despite the fact that they don't have a very good record, the Ravens are certainly expected to win. But we've seen as of late Mark Ingram taking a big-time backseat to J.K. Dobbins and to Gus Edwards. We also heard John Harbaugh mention in a recent press conference that Mark Ingram's time will come. And he has no doubt about that. So my question to you, Jimmy, this week, will we see more of Mark Ingram, or is his time has not come yet?
This week, we will not see more of Mark Ingram. His time has not yet come. In fact, his time has come and gone.
Oh, man.
In Baltimore. The only way that we will ever see Mark Ingram again playing a major role in this offense is if Dobbins or Gus get hurt. That's the only way that I see it happening. I just think that Gus has done more than enough. He has beat the door down of every opportunity that's been given him to say, you cannot keep me on the sidelines. And Dobbins, the same thing, but Gus has been doing it for years now at this point. So you can't keep him off the field. So I think that it's John's way of protecting his veterans. He has a way of doing this, and I think it's good for our team for recruiting later on and for the goodwill of our organization. But yeah, I don't think we'll see Mark with over 5 carries for the rest of his time in a game unless one of those 2 get injured.
Wow.
What do you think?
Yeah, and it's crazy because before the season started, I don't think either one of us would have predicted it happening this year. I think we both mentioned it could certainly and most likely will happen next year,
Right.
but not this year. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of torn because I like Mark Ingram. I think he's the funniest guy on our team. I think he's one of the most entertaining people I've ever seen in sports. He's absolutely hilarious. He seems like the greatest teammate that you could have. He has no problem hyping up a teammate. I mean, a lot of guys with their ego, naturally, they don't like praising others with the type of praise he will heap upon Lamar and even the guys that are competing against him and taking his job with JK and Gus. I mean, he gushes him. So I just love him as a teammate, as a person. He's saying all the right things. I'm going to stay ready. When my number's called, I'll go in there. I'll be ready to go. But I just don't know how he'll ever, if you're going on based on how they're playing and strictly based on their performance on the field and in practice, you can't take Gus and you can't take JK off the field for Mark. You just can't do it. I mean, and it's not even really a knock against Mark. It's just they've just been playing at such a high level between Dobbins and Gus. I mean, both are hovering. Dobbins is averaging 5.2 a carry, and Gus is just under 5 at 4.9. And not to say Mark's doing poorly. He's over 4 carries at 4.1 yards per carry, but it's just for whatever reason, The combination of those two, Edwards and Dobbins, it just has worked. It's just worked. And so I don't know how you go back to Ingram unless you're right, unless there's an injury or something of that, something along those lines.
Now, I want to move over to the wide receiver core. Usually don't have too much to talk about other than like Marquise Brown and it's like Marquise Brown and the Pips or something. But Dez Bryant came on last week, throwing up the X. We saw the touchdown. But what I want to ask you is this a trend that we will see? I said it when we signed Dez, and I'm standing by it. Dez will make a big red zone play in the playoffs when we need him to. I think it will be not the volume, but it would be a singular play that is reminiscent of Anquan Bolden-esque, right? Like catching it in traffic, pointing it, pointing down at the Patriots guy, laughing after he scores the touchdown. It will be that type of play. But my question is, he's got the touchdown. It looks like they're starting working him more into the offense. Do you see that as a trend, or was it kind of okay, we're blowing this team out, we'll give Dev some love? How do you see that going?
I mean, I think it's a trend, and I certainly hope it's a trend, because this guy has brought an energy to this team, to this offense. I mean, it's amazing, because when Dez was in Dallas, great talent, didn't have anything really bad to say, but then there starts to be some stuff coming out in the media, and he starts to gain a reputation where you think he's maybe not the best teammate, maybe not the best guy to have on your team, especially if his talents start to diminish. But now that he's been in Baltimore, we've seen him up close and personal. Man, he has totally changed my mind on him as a person and as a player. I mean, this guy is the most positive. He has been nothing but thankful and showing nothing but gratitude for the Ravens and this opportunity. He's taken advantage of it. He's working like crazy. I mean, everyone's raving about how hard he's working, how humble he's been, how I mean, it's just so. And then you talk about his talent, man. Even though he hasn't gotten a ton of targets, man, that route, last week where he first of all, he went and made contact with the corner and stunned the corner with those heavy hands. And then not only was he open initially, where Lamar was forced to evade some tacklers in the pocket and roll out, but then he kept working and was really a phenomenal play, working back to the ball, making the touchdown catch. I think we do see more of Dez. And I mean, look, what are you gonna keep trotting Boykin out there? I mean, look, he made a nice catch last week, but I still don't think he scares a single person on the defensive side of the ball, whereas I believe Dez does.
That's so awesome. I love to hear that. I can't wait to see more Dez. But one of the things that's been running through my mind throughout this week is the concern for a letdown offensively and the potential for us to look past the Giants. This is something that I've been thinking about and talking to other people about when I talk about this upcoming game. Everyone is assuming that we're going to win out. I'm assuming that we're going to win out, but it is something that we've seen this team do, and I think it had to do with their age. Last year, Lamar openly admitted to looking past the Titans. We are a very, very young team. So I think that, once again, that had a lot to do with it. Do you have any concern that they will be looking past the Giants and even the Bengals, but specifically the Giants this week, and could lead to a potential letdown?
Well, let me start by saying this. I think that any team that has this looseness about them, like the Giants, although they still have something to play for, I'm sure they're going to come into this game with that underdog mentality. They're going to come in with nothing to lose, with all the pressure being on the Ravens. I mean, the Ravens have everything to play for. They have the reigning MVP at quarterback. They have these question marks surrounding them in big games and big situations. All the pressure is going to be on the Ravens. So while I think the Ravens are far more talented, they're the better team. It's just no doubt about it. You'd be hard pressed to find a single position group in which you favor the Giants over the Ravens. But at the same time, you could say that same thing about the Rams and the Jets this past week. As a matter of fact, I think the Jets lose more out of winning than the Giants would out of winning, gain out of winning. You know what I mean? So, with the Giants losing out on Lawrence, they had everything to lose for, and yet they still went out there because they have pride, because they want to put on
the Jets.
Oh, did I say the Giants? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
The Jets went out there. They took on an LA Ram team that, when they played the Patriots, Cam Akers ran all over them. They looked phenomenal. Nobody would have predicted that the Rams would lose to the lowly New York Jets. And yet they did, and they got handled. All I'm saying is that while I do believe I haven't seen the Ravens lose these kind of games since Flacco's been here. Under Lamar Jackson, their worst loss, I guess, would be, the Browns game last year and then the
Or maybe
Patriots
the
game this
Patriots.
year. Exactly. But I mean, these aren't the stinkers that we've seen in the past where the Ravens played down to the level of their competition and lost to a 4-win team. This just isn't, it just hasn't happened under Lamar. So I do think we win the game, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that the Ravens, for whatever reason, overlook them, get down and maybe a hole early on by not playing the cleanest of games. And then they have to try and come back. And if they come up short, it's possible. Very unlikely, but possible. What do you think?
I hope you're right.
About
I
what?
hope you're right. I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I just get concerned sometimes because of the age, the maturity of the entire offensive core is very young. I mean, if you look at our offensive core, all these guys are still on the rookie deal. You think of Lamar, Marquise, Andrews, Dobbins, Orlando, all these guys are very young players still gaining ground in the NFL. Obviously, Lamar's done a lot in his young career, but he's still young. So I don't want them to get in their head and look past any team. I do believe that they are not doing that, though. If I had to pick a side, I don't think they are, because I think now they said, okay, we've been there before. We felt that sting. We're not doing that again, right? Sometimes a little kid has to learn by getting burnt, right?
Yep.
He's got to know what hot is by touching the stove. If not, he's never going to know what hot is. And Lamar learned real quick what it's like to get burnt last year, and I don't think he wants that feeling again. So I do tend to agree with you on that one.
Yeah, and is there any chance that a tightness? You mentioned that, like, could that get him like, oh man, we can't lose to a team like this if it remains close.
I think it's good that we play with a level of urgency. And in fact, I think Marquise, not necessarily Lamar, but Marquise Brown needs it. He plays different when he has a level of urgency. So I'm thinking, all right, I think I'm okay with it. In fact, when I was a kid, best advice I got from my dad before a big game, I remember he was like, it's okay. I kept talking about how nervous I was. It's okay to be nervous. Nerves make you sharp. Like, don't use them for your disadvantage. Use them for your advantage. So I'm okay with it. I can see what you're saying about like a psychological tightness, but I think it will make them sharp. That's my hope. Maybe I'm being optimist, but that's my hope. But this one is interesting, because this is something that I brought up last week, and I'm gonna bring it up again because I think it's gonna be a lopsided game. Any chance we see old number 2 Tyler Huntley from the University of Utah trotting out in the field in the fourth quarter? Do you think it'll be that type of game, Glenn?
Man, I didn't think last week would be that type of game, and it got ugly really, really quick for the Jags. So I'm going to agree. I think it does. I mean, I look at the fact that Daniel Jones is not healthy right now. He doesn't have that athleticism that scares the defense. I think that they're just too beat up. I don't see a way that they hang in this game, and I do think we see him, but not as much of him. Woody came in the 8-minute mark in the Jags game. I think if we do see Tyler, it's for one series, and it's under the 3-minute mark. But yeah, I think we see Tyler Huntley, and here's why, Jimmy. I just want to get into some numbers as to why I think we'll see Tyler Huntley. Since Lamar Jackson has returned off the COVID-19 list, he's played in 3 games. Let me just go over some of these numbers and where he ranks over these last 3 games. His total QBR, pretty important number here, 94.6 total QBR, which is first in the entire National Football League. Yards per attempt, 9.1 yards per attempt, which is also first in the National Football League. Now, rushing yards, he has 253 over the last 3 games, which is 8th overall in the league. Yards per carry, he's averaging 7.91, which is somehow second in the league. I want to find out who the heck is averaging more than 8 yards a carry, other than Lamar Jackson. And then total touchdowns, the most important thing. Can you put the points on the board? 10 total touchdowns in the last 3 games, first in the league. So right now the offense is starting to round into form here. And if he can keep getting better and keep improving, and the passing game can keep evolving and improving, it's going to be trouble, Jimmy, for these teams in the playoffs.
I'm telling you, no one wants to see us. I've been saying it for a couple weeks, right? It's about how we get in. And if we get in the right way, you better look out. So yeah, I agree with you, and I love hearing those stats, man. It gives me goosebumps. I'm so excited about moving forward for the Ravens here. Now, defensively, the injuries we talked about this are starting to mount up. Now, we had a lot of guys come to practice today on Christmas Eve. do you have any concerns about our injuries overall, just the amount of them moving forward on the defensive side of the ball? Does it make you a little nervous?
Well, it does as long as I mean you mentioned a lot of guys coming back, which really helps. When you talk about Calais coming back, and you said Purnell came back,
Yep,
but still not Jimmy and still not Marcus. Is that correct?
correct.
Now you said Marcus was working with a trainer, so maybe he's inching closer. But
Right.
honestly, I think that their whole goal is to get these guys ready for when they're going to be needed most, which is of course not this week, and it's not next week even. Even though the Bengals did just beat the Steelers, I still think that they're confident enough and we're good enough to go into that game without those guys and get a win. So as long as you're going to tell me that these guys are going to be ready for the first round of the playoffs, then I'm not that concerned because I still think they can get through these last 2 games without those guys. But if you're telling me that those injuries are going to linger on, and even if they can play in the first round, they're going to be playing at 80% of what they normally are, yeah, then I'm concerned because when you go to the playoffs, you're only playing good teams, Jimbo. You ain't playing the Giants and the Bengals.
Right. No, I'm with you there. The only thing I will say though is that if we can get those guys back even at 80%, I would feel like every other team in the playoffs is probably pretty close to that. Everybody sustained some pretty significant injuries and has some nagging injuries at that point. Part of the NFL season is a battle of attrition, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, if we can get them back and practicing more, that would be huge. But
Hey,
I was looking.
I'm sorry. I think we missed a couple guys on their defensive side of the ball that I wanted to highlight and just get your quick take on those guys. You talk about a guy like Jabril Peppers being he might be the biggest Swiss Army knife in the National Football League. This guy is a great returner. He can play slot corner. He can play deep third. He can play up in I mean, this guy can do absolutely everything. He's going to be all over the field. He's got me a little concerned. I think a lot of people remember him being a former Brown, and they haven't seen him for a few years now that Odell Beckham got traded there. But Logan Ryan, another guy, he's a safety. He's got 9 pass breakups this year. I'm sure we remember him being a former Patriot. I believe he was a Titan as well. And then, but the big guy I want to point out, James Bradbury, their corner, Pro Bowl corner. He came over in the offseason, I believe, from the Carolina Panthers, if I remember correctly. This guy can play. He can run. I'm sure going to be the guy tasked to take on Marquise Brown in the secondary, and it's going to be an interesting matchup. Marquise is going to have his hands full dealing with James because I'm sure they're going to have Logan looking over top and all that stuff. And then as far as the defensive line, I just want to bring up Leonard Williams. He's a force in the middle, has 8.5 sacks on the season. That's darn impressive. Dexter Lawrence is also a defensive end there. He's got 4 sacks on the season. Watch out for those 2 guys. Challenging our offensive line, especially if Tyree Phillips isn't able to go. We're going to look just at Fluker. I'm sure there's a reason the Ravens cycle those 2 in and out in situations where it's advantageous. So just watch out for Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence on defensive line.
Yeah, well, part of the reason why I glossed over him is because I look, I'm doing what I'm telling the Ravens not to do. I'm not concerned.
You're looking past.
Yeah,
okay.
But this is why I think that. Just like the Chiefs are the most difficult offense to stop. Yes. But I think when we are healthy and we are humming, I think that we are a close second. As far as what we do schematically, as far as the matchup issues that we propose to defenses with the rare talent that is Lamar Jackson. Look, Patrick Mahomes is sure, he's the best quarterback in the league. A lot of people would say this, that, and the other. But as far as unique talent, every bit as unique as he is, Lamar Jackson is equally as unique and as difficult as a guy to prepare for. I think that's fair for anyone to say. So with that, based on our scheme, even though those guys defensively, if we just do our job and we execute our scheme and don't let Greg Roman outthink and out-tinker the offense, then I have very little concern really about almost any defense as long as we don't shoot ourselves in the foot. It makes me think of the Warriors back in the day when it was all about them beating themselves in the rare occasions that they would lose. It wasn't about other teams beating them. So anyway, that was just my my knock towards their defense.
No, I think you're right though. I think the difference between is that the Lamar Jackson has that ability to run the ball so well. I mean, Tony Dungy was just getting criticized by Tom Brady because he put out his top quarterbacks that were most difficult to prepare for and play against, and he had Tom Brady at number 9. And Tom Brady took offense to it. And he said, but look, the guys I had ahead of you, Elway, Steve Young, these are guys that had that element of their legs, and that just changes things. But I want to get into some of the keys to the game because it sounds like you're pretty confident, but I'm sure you still have your keys offensively and defensively. So I'm going to get us started. For me, offensively,
Okay.
it's just play clean. If you play a team where you're clearly the superior talent, obviously have more to play for, you just got to make sure you don't beat yourself. So as long as I think the Ravens offense doesn't kill themselves with penalties and turnovers, I think it's an easy one. What do you got?
Yeah, so mine is it. I mean, I guess kind of similar to yours, but it's just get up on them early, just like we did in Jacksonville. Execute in that first quarter, because when we get ahead, the run game does its job. The rest is just butter to me. The defense will hunt. Wink does his thing, and the run game does their thing. So get up on them early. Don't the first quarter is going to be everything. So execute early is, I guess, what I would say offensively.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, as far as defensive goes, I'm going to go BYOE. We heard that statement early in the season. We heard a lot of players making that, or saying that. Bring your own energy is what you need with the lack of fans in the stands. Well, I think this game's the same way. I mean, you're going to be on the defense. You're going to look across the sideline. You're not going to see a bunch of guys over there across the line of scrimmage. You're not going to see a bunch of guys that scare you. You're going to see Daniel Jones, Gallman. You're not going to be blown away. So you got to bring your own energy on defense. I think energy on defense is most important, even more than offense. You got to have that intensity. You got to come in amped up, ready to play. And just remind these guys that they're the New York Giants and that they're in the worst division in football and they're playing the best division in football in the AFC North.
Yeah, and potentially, like you said, the hottest guy in the NFL as far as Lamar Jackson goes. But mine, and it's linked to my offensive one, but play clean and no stupid penalties. I'm really referring to stupid penalties like Judon might be leading the league in personal fouls
late hits
this year.
Yeah.
Things like that. And it seems like we have a dumb one every game. We can count on one, whether it's from Sack Daddy, or it's from Judon or even McPhee, the list goes on. But for me, it's if we have these penalties, it's their back-breaking penalties for the defense because you get them in a 3rd and long, and then it's usually I feel like it's in a 3rd and long where it's a clear passing scenario, and we end up popping their quarterback late or whatever the case may be. And so it's just another way for us to keep them in the game longer. Mm-hmm. So play clean, don't be overzealous, and let's come out with the W. But for me, it's just about playing clean on defense.
Okay.
But Glenn,
yeah,
we're gonna get into our big game predictions. And I'm feeling good about it because I think last week we both did pretty good because offensively you went Andrews. Andrews had a good game.
Yep.
And then defensively I went Unique and he had a good game.
But you almost nailed his. I mean, you darn near predicted perfectly what Unique was going to do. So shout out to you there because we have not always been good on our predictions. But I'm going to get us started, and I think I'm going to knock this one out of the park, Jimbo. I got Patrick Queen getting a sack, a pass deflection, and he's going to lead our team in tackles. He's going to hit the trifecta.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this guy's a blur on the field. I think they use him in a sack package this week. He gets the sack, and as I said, I think he breaks up a pass going to Evan Ingram, and then also leads our team in tackles. What do you got?
I like it. So I'm going with LJ Fort. Finally gets his interception, and I was gonna say he gets a touchdown off of it, but he gets the interception. And then on top of that, gets a tackle for a loss. So I think that would be a big deal for LJ Fort because he's been on the verge of getting interception. You saw was that the Steelers game in which he had his knee in?
He had a pick 6 last week get taken away, right?
Yeah, had the pick 6 against the Jags last week. They got taken away. And then the week previous to that, that wasn't the Steelers game, but the week previous to that, he had one where he caught it and put the knee down in the end zone, and John didn't challenge it.
That's right. Yeah.
So I think he's been on the verge of this
Browns
interception,
game.
And I think the Browns game, right? And I think it's going to happen this week, along as well as a tackle for loss. So my defensive big game prediction will be LJ Fort. Now offensively, this one is interesting because I think they directly contradict each other between you and I. So I'm going to start off here, and I'm saying my boy, number 35, Gus Bus, goes for 85 plus and a touchdown. And this is the other thing I'll say. He will finally break. Forget the yardage because even with 7 carries, Gus will put up a $120 on you. But I'm saying he finally breaks 10 carries in this game. They're going to use a little more volume, 85 plus yards and a TD. Who you got?
Man, it's funny. I got Dobbins going over 100 and a touchdown. And I think Gus will be involved, but I think his lack of carries, I see him getting 7 carries and 65 yards. Yeah. Still a heck of a day. I mean, still a heck of a day, but I think Dobbins gets over 100 and gets. It's funny. We both must love linebackers and running backs in this one because we both picked. And I don't know if it's possible for both of us to be right on all of this unless we just go absolutely bonkers on the ground. But we'll see. But I want to get into my final score because I think this is hammer time for the Baltimore Ravens. I think they beat them down and beat them down handily. They probably get a defensive score. They get something other than an offensive score, whether it be special teams or defense. They win 38-13, beat the crap out of them. What do you got?
Nice. So I'm close score. I think this is going to be a statement on a number of levels. One, I think it's going to be a complete game by the Ravens, offensively, special teams, and defensively. But I think it will be a statement by the defense. I think we hold them to a touchdown and a field goal. So I go 34-10. I don't think we give them any other daylight. We shut them down. And Danny Dimes might give us the ball a couple times. You know, the Danny Dimes special is two interceptions and a fumble.
Is that
so?
Sounds like the Joe Flacco special.
So that's what I think is going to be. You guys let us know who your offensive and defensive big game prediction players
but more importantly, don't forget our competition.
That's right. If you want to get a shout out on the show, what team of the 4 teams that could possibly help us out to get into the playoffs is going to help us out? Who will give us a little crack in that door to let us in? And let us know what you guys think. What will the score of the game gonna be? What will the score of the game be based on your predictions? And we'll talk to you guys soon.
See you.